this is Coach PDHP with a video giving you some information on some practical tips on what to do on examination day 2014, or as I like to call it, game day. Kickoff for the PDHPE 2014 edition is Wednesday the 15th of October at 1:55 p.m. and this video is all about giving you some practical tips to maximize your mark for all the hard work that you may have put in the weeks and months in the lead up to the exam. It'd be really unfortunate if poor planning was undone in that 1 hour and in the 3 hours of the actual exam. So here's some practical tips which may help you. My advice is to start off in that 1 hour in the lead up to the exam. My advice is to get to school nice and early. You don't want to be hassled about getting perhaps stuck in any traffic. Get to school nice and early, tuck yourself away in the library and start implementing one of the dot points from Core 2, psychological strategies to manage your anxiety, because you absolutely want to be wanting to go into this exam with low levels of arousal. You don't want to be stressed when you get in there, and getting yourself in the library nice and early, getting yourself away from those know-it-all students, I think is a big advantage, because those know-it-all students can create a bit of a problem. For example, you might get that student who says, did you get the email from Lucas, who said that you have to be able to compare the health inequities of a Mongolian goat herder with ATSE in health inequities. Hearing someone say that at the last moment is just simply not going to be helpful. Or you could get potentially a student, perhaps by someone by the name of Kai, coming up to someone by the name of, I don't know, Hayden or Spencer, for example, and said, did you get the email from Lucas which says you have to be able to draw an ATP molecule fully color-coded, and he's got his colouring in pencils laid out before you're ready to go, looking confident. Bad examples these are, but I have seen it happen before, where students are proudly confidently going around saying how much of the syllabus they actually know, and it starts putting other students off. My advice is to keep to yourself in that 1 hour before the exam, or stay with someone who you trust, and it's a time to be going over those last perhaps mind maps that you've spent a lot of time in preparing. It's certainly not a time for last minute cramming, but just a bit of a refresher course on some of the key dot points from the syllabus. In that maybe 10 to 15 minutes to go, I think it's time to actually visualize. What is your plan going to be once you actually sit down and they say start reading? You want to be fully committed to your plan. Don't change at the last moment. Know what you're going to do, and it's going to maximize your chances of success. So you're sitting in the actual exam hall now. It's 1:55 and the person running the exam says begin reading. Well, what is it that you exactly read? There's a lots of different theories out there. My advice simply is to just read the actual multiple choice questions. The reason for this is I'm reluctant for students to start reading through the whole paper, just in case there's a 12-mark sports medicine question in there that throws you, that you're not exactly sure of at that stage, and it puts you immediately in a bad frame of mind. And you don't want to be attacking multiple choice questions already feeling stressed. So my advice, stick simply to the multiple choice questions in your reading. 5 minutes is not very long. That's only giving you 15 seconds on each question of reading. So you can easily use that 5 minutes on the multiple choice alone, and perhaps even get the first 1, 2 or 3 questions, the answers to them in your head, ready to go. So when they say you may start, you just get straight in attacking those multiple choice questions. So the actual layout of the exam looks something like this. You've got part A, which is worth 20 marks. That's multiple choice. Questions 1 to 10 are core 1. Questions 11 to 20 are core 2, factors affecting performance. You then go on to part B, which is worth 40 marks, and these are the short answer questions for core 1 and core 2. My advice here is to do a plan for each of the questions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And finally, you finish off with probably the more difficult section, 40 marks. It's for the 2 options that you would have studied, and from the school I'm at, in this case, it's going to be option 2 and option 3. And I'll speak a little bit more about the options shortly as well. So when it comes to the multiple choice, again, there's lots and lots of different opinion out there. I'm not going to spend too much time on multiple choice technique. Stick to one that you're actually familiar with. But one of the reasons in terms of doing multiple choice first, it can actually give you some information. It is rare, but sometimes it happens that you can use in some of the short answer questions. So for example, here could be an example. You get a question about the Ottawa Charter and they give you some of the action areas of the Ottawa Charter in the example. And you never know your luck, you could be talking about the Ottawa Charter in a short answer down the track. So do the multiple choice questions first. In each of the multiple choice questions, there's normally one of the options that's just you can rule out straight away. So in this example here, question 5, that's talking about ancillary cover and private health insurance. You might not have the foggiest idea what ancillary cover means, but you might know a little bit about private health insurance. And you know that private health insurance has nothing to do with general practitioner fees. So you're just going to be ruling out question 8 straight away. So your guess comes down to B, C or D. And you might even be able to narrow it down even further by saying you're pretty sure that D, their treatment as a private patient in a public hospital, is also going to be ruled out. Private insurance certainly relates to private hospital, but from what I'm aware, it has nothing to do with public hospitals. You'd be able to rule out D as well. So you're then tossing up between B or C, and if you know anything about ancillary cover, you would know that the answer to that question is going to be C for question 5. So you've done your multiple choice and you get to the short answer question. And I'm going to quickly talking about doing a plan. Plan is really quick. It's not going to take up a lot of your time. And what many students don't realise is the markers read plans. So there is a potential for getting marks, even if you perhaps have a time issue somewhere and you don't get to completing a question. The plan can certainly help you. So for this question here, why is it important to prioritise particular health issues in Australia? Include examples in your answer. And here is the actual dot point from the syllabus. Hopefully when you come to answering this question, you'll know how to apply some of those dash points. So the plan that I'm going to actually use here, is up the top here. Of course, I wouldn't be able to type it. This is what I would probably write, something like this in the top part of the question. I'm going to write something like priority population groups, which is one of the dash points. I'm going to talk about inequity linked to that, and the priority population groups I'm going to write about is ATSI, and I could link diabetes and life expectancy to that. The other group I could talk about is rural and remote people and the distance that they have to get to make appointments or critical emergencies, and link that into the flying doctor service. The other dash point I'm going to write about, if I get the opportunity, is prevalence of the condition, and make the link between cardiovascular disease and cancer, and how knowing the statistical information or the epidemiology behind those two figures, governments are able to prioritise particular health issues. You might not know the full dash point cost to the community, but you might just know the word costs, and just write that in your plan. You never know, it could get you over the line in getting you an extra mark. The other point to consider when it comes to short answer questions in particular is too many students make this mistake time and time again. They think they listen to their English teacher a little bit too much and think it's time to get a fancy introduction. In a 6-line question, there is absolutely no need, and it actually is of a hindrance to write an introduction. I've actually written one there in black, and it actually adds nothing to the question whatsoever. So the question is, describe the effect of stroke volume and cardiac output on aerobic performance. If I was to start off by writing stroke volume and cardiac output are important factors to consider when it comes to athletic performance, I'm so far on 0 marks, and I've wasted 2 lines of my 6 lines. Do not rewrite the question or give a worthless introduction is my advice. Something along the lines of stroke volume is the amount of blood that leaves the heart in each beat would be a good way to start that question. So no introduction in short answer questions. Some students, this is another recommendation which I believe is helpful, is underlining what is the key parts of the actual question. And there's always 3 key parts. There's the key word, which in this case is the word described. I've underlined it in green. Purple, which is the actual syllabus content, which in this question is the characteristics of the learner. And finally, what I've underlined in orange there is to learn a new skill. They are the 3 key components of the question. And it helps you set yourself up with exactly it is what you have to do for that particular question. So in this example here, I've got my 2 dash points. I'm going to write about confidence and past experience, and I'm going to get straight into answering that question without any introduction. So we've done our short answer, and we've got ourselves now to the last section. We're 40 marks away from finishing PDHPE. The actual advice from the examiners here is to allow 1 hour and 10 minutes for this section. the 10 minutes that hopefully you've got yourself from the multiple choice, I would be allocating to this section here. So allowing 1 hour 20 for this section is what my advice would be. So you're wanting to start this with about 85 minutes remaining in the exam, and that leaves you with 5 minutes at the end just to have that quick check over of your final paper. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to put a cross through the questions that you did not study. And for my class, this would be option 1, would be one example here, the health of young people. Now, if you had a look at this question 29A, explain the risk and protective factors associated with one health issue affecting young people. I'm tipping there's a lot of people who would fancy their chances of being able to do that question, and it might actually persuade them into giving it a go. Do not do it. It is difficult. If you actually had a look at the syllabus, you'd probably be surprised to see that it's actually not what you think it is. So under no circumstances attempt to do an option that you have not studied in class. So in the case of my class, we're one of the rare breed in the state who actually do the option sport and physical activity in Australian society. So you're not putting a cross through that. It's going to be one of the first option question that you attack. And when it comes to extended response, I think it's time to get sexy. And that is the outline I give to my students about how to attack an extended response question. It's about stating the syllabus point, explaining the syllabus point, then getting your examples out there and why that example is relevant. And then finally, the why in sexy. Why is the example relevant? And finally, make your judgment in linking it back to what the question is actually asking you. So for a practical example, I'll use sports medicine as an example here, and question 31B. Why are acclimatization and fluid intake effective strategies for supporting the body's temperature regulation mechanism? It's actually quite a difficult question. Here's what the examination booklet will look like, and here's my advice what to actually do. This is in red here is not what you would do. I've just put it here. I've written the question out again and color coded it again. In green is the key. What they're asked is why. In this case, they've thrown you out a little bit and not put in one of the verbs. I'll speak about that in a moment as well. The syllabus terminology is acclimatization and fluid intake, and in orange, which might not be that clear there, is the body's temperature regulation mechanism. So there's sort of the 3 steps to the question of what you're required to do. It's actually in this question it's told you about the 2 syllabus points to write about acclimatization and fluid intake, but you could also write about climatic conditions as well. But I'm going to write a plan for this question, and the plan is going to be written out in the sexy acronym. So I'm going to start off by writing about the syllabus point acclimatization. When it comes to that, in summary, I'm going to write about getting the body accustomed to climatic conditions. My example is going to be the Soccer World Cup in Brazil and the hot and humid conditions the soccer is found there. And why is this relevant to the question? I'm going to write something about if the body's not acclimatized, performance will suffer. When it comes to fluid intake, when it comes to explaining fluid intake, I'm going to talk about fluid loss in hot and humid conditions and the problem of dehydration. The example is the Australian Open tennis, where players are unable to continue often when a match goes into 3 and 5 sets. And I'm going to talk about how fluid intake plan is really important for athletes, and I'm also going to link into about the importance of sports drinks. So that's why it's important to do a plan. It sets yourself up. Some final key points for the exam. Know the key terms. These are talking about the verbs that often are at the start of the question. Low mark verbs include such words as outline and identify. They're typically associated with 3 and 4 mark questions. Then you get into your mid-range verbs, which might be your 5 and 6 mark questions, and they'll often be along the lines of describe, discuss, and compare. And then you get into your high mark verbs, which might be an 8 mark question in core 1 or core 2, or a big 12 marker to be found in the option questions, where you might be required to do something along the lines of recommend or justify. And make sure you do what they're requiring you to do. So an example for a high mark verb in terms of recommend, it might be along the lines of recommend supplements for athletes. That is actually getting you to provide reasons in favour of supplements in terms of athletes. So when it comes to recommend, you certainly wouldn't be talking down supplements. It's all about giving some examples of why they are a benefit. So make sure you know your key terms. That's just some of them there. Get some research done in the last few weeks leading up to the exam of what is exactly required for each of the key terms. Finally, examples. I want to talk to you about examples in your particularly extended response and the importance of using quality examples. I want to talk about what I call the so what principle. Here's what the so what principle means. The one sentence you wrote for the example is probably not going to be enough. It's not going to cut it to get you in the top marking band. So as an example, I'm talking about the question from sports medicine about acclimatisation, and this is the example I've written, which would not be good enough. At the 2014 World Cup, the Socceroos travelled to Brazil 2 weeks early to acclimatise for the expected hot and humid conditions. So I'm applying here the so what principle. So what? What does that actually mean, what you just wrote in that first sentence? Well, to get into that top band, you're going to be wanting to add a little bit more to your example here. So here's what the full example. At the 2014 World Cup, the Socceroos travelled to Brazil 2 weeks early to acclimatise for the expected hot and humid conditions. That's what I wrote first up. The so what principle is studies have shown acclimatisation over 6 to 12 days can increase tolerance time in the heat by the body increasing sweat rate and lowering heart rate during exercise. That is the sort of example that is going to get you into the top band. So make sure your examples are quality. If you have time left up your sleeve, 5 to 10 minutes to go before the exam, you think you're finished, don't sit there and put your pen down. If you have more to write in some of the questions, get it out there. Ask for ask for another exam booklet or write in the space near the lines. More writing can mean more marks. So hopefully that's helped you. For more Year 12 Coach PDHPE information, see the website or follow on Twitter at Coach PDHPE.